Hello everyone, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to this Microfocus CORBA webinar. My name is Ed Erie. I'm the Product Marketing Director for our CORBA Solutions here at Microfocus, and I also have the pleasure of being your host for today's session. As you can see, the topic of today's webinar is CORBA and Containers. We'll take a closer look at some of the challenges organizations are facing in terms of planning for containers, but then also how some of the Microfocus CORBA solutions help address some of those challenges, and you'll get to see the technology in action. As I said, my name is Ed Erie. I'm joined here today by several special guests. First is Matteo Vescovi. Matteo is a technical architect here at Microfocus, and you'll be hearing from him very shortly. Also joining us here today is Adalbert Zajans. Adalbert is a senior systems developer, and he'll be leading our technical demonstration for today's session. Last but not least, we have Mr. John Draga joining us here today, Senior Director of our Development and Product Management team, responsible for our CORBA technology. Today's session, as I mentioned, is part of a much larger series around the future of CORBA technology. Today's topic will be a closer look at containerization and Docker, but as you can see, we have other topics planned in the coming months. So we have a closer look at CORBA security and SSL in June, and then in September, we'll take a closer look at CORBA integration using REST and JSON. So please stay tuned, please watch your inbox. There'll be further information and promotional detail around these webinars as they become available. Before I hand things over to our first speaker, just a few quick housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded, so you'll each receive a copy of the webinar following today's broadcast. If you do happen to have a question at any time during today's broadcast, please feel free to submit your question using the Q&A chat function within the GoToWebinar control panel. Myself and Kara Farley, moderators for today's session, will do our best to help you, but then you'll also have an opportunity to pose any technical questions that you'd like to our expert panel, which we'll cover a bit later in today's broadcast. So with those items out of the way, I'd like to introduce our first speaker here today, Mr. Matteo Vescovi. Matteo, over to you.
Thank you, Ed. Next slide, please. So let me start. What is Docker? What are containers? Here's a brief summary of what Docker containers are all about, starting from the bottom up. A Docker container is a standardized, isolated, and encapsulated environment that runs your applications. What does a container run? It runs an instance of a container image, which is a lightweight, standalone executable package that includes everything you need to run your application: the executables, the runtime, your third-party libraries, system tools and libraries, configuration data. Everything that's needed for your application to run. So Docker is a platform designed to package, deploy, and run applications in containers. Next slide, please. Why would you want to package your CORBA application in Docker containers? Well, for the same reasons you would want to package any application in Docker. The main reasons are that Docker gives you the ability to package everything that's required to develop, deploy, and run your application in a standardized unit. This lowers your development costs, it enables agile development practices, and it empowers DevOps. Containers are lightweight compared to virtual machines. They're less resource hungry, they require less memory and storage, and they can spin up much faster than VMs. Containers are portable. You can spin up a container from a Docker image on any Linux or Windows machine. You can deploy Docker to cloud or hybrid environments with ease. And containers are secure. This is essentially achieved through container isolation. Your application's compute, storage, and networking resources are sandboxed and isolated inside a container. Next slide, please. So that sounds great, But what are the challenges involved in containerizing a CORBA application in Docker? Well, the challenges stem from the fact that Docker enforces container network isolation. So the network inside a container is not reachable by default from the outside. Servers running inside a container and listening on a specific port will not receive requests from clients unless these ports are explicitly forwarded and exposed through Docker config. Also, the typical use case that Docker caters for is servers that listen on fixed ports, like, for example, your standard web server on port 80. On the other hand, CORBA deployments typically use both fixed and random ports for their services and servers. And CORBA interoperable object references, or IORs for short, directly embed such host and port details, which are unusable on the outside of the container due to network isolation. Next slide, please. So to address these challenges and to offer a solution to deploy CORBA applications to cloud and Docker environments, Micro Focus plans to deliver a CORBA for Cloud and Docker product in January 2019. This new product will deliver the functionality and the tooling required to run CORBA applications in Docker with minimum friction. In the box, we'll get a domain boundary controller. This is a fundamental piece in enabling CORBA applications to work seamlessly within a containerized environment. We'll get enhancements to allow additional flexibility in how addresses are published in IORs. This is also a key strategy in successfully moving CORBA applications to Docker containers. We'll get pre-made Docker file recipes to build VisiBroker and Orbix container images that can be used as a starting point to layer your CORBA applications on top. So these Docker files can be modified, for example, rebased on base layers of your choice. This new product will also include documentation and best practices material to help you get started and produce quality Docker images. We'll also get several other enhancements to our CORBA products to support operating within Docker containers. Next slide, please. Let's take a minute to explore in a bit more detail what the domain boundary controller component is about. The boundary controller is a CORBA application layer gateway that gets deployed inside each Docker container. It inspects messages that flow through the container network, and it transparently modifies IOP messages as needed. This enables CORBA requests and replies to flow through the container boundary as if that boundary wasn't there, in a controlled and secure fashion. The domain boundary controller is not just a simple IOP gateway. It is a functionally enhanced IOP firewall component, in the sense that it can also filter out hostile and destructive messages. It can provide connection management, and it can enforce fine-grained access control to guarantee that only trusted peers can connect and execute the desired operations. The other enhancements delivered in the CORBA for Cloud and Docker product target the orbs configuration mechanism to enable finer control of the addresses that are published within CORBA IORs. This will ensure that the addresses that are published within an IOR are reachable from outside a container. And this approach complements the various networking modes supported by Docker. Next up, we have a quick demonstration of some of the techniques that we've been using to help some of our customers with POCs that involved moving complex CORBA applications to Docker and deploying these Dockerized CORBA applications on top of multi-data center clusters. Next slide, please. So in the first part of the demo, we'll see how easy it is to package a CORBA server into a Docker container. For this demo, we'll use the Bang demo that ships with the Orbix product. We'll build a Docker image containing the Bang server and the domain boundary controller component. We'll spin up an instance of the Dockerized bank server and show how a client running on the physical host outside of Docker can connect to the server in a straightforward manner, thanks to the use of the domain boundary controller components running inside the Docker container. Then we'll show how we can leverage Docker to spin up several instances of the CORBA server image. This will allow us to provide high availability to the bank service by replicating the same Docker image in several container instances. We will demonstrate load balancing among the available replicas through DNS resolution using a console DNS service. I'll now hand over to Adalbert, who will walk us through the demo.
Thank you very much, Matteo, and welcome. Let me start the sharing. Okay. Right, so welcome, thank you very much. And so let me start by demonstrating how easy it is to build and deploy an application in a Docker container, a CORBA application in a Docker container. So first, it's a simple line to just build a Docker container with a Docker image. To build this container, this goes very quick because it's cached, but it goes in generally quick because Docker is good. And we can use this Docker image is built on this Docker file, with this Docker file. So it is based on Orbix base layer that I will explain in a second. I will show the Docker file for this. So all is needed is just adding your application to it. It can be a pre-built application, or you can even build this application at image build time. And this and it will expose the port 3000. So this is going to be the port, the outside available port, and the domain boundary controller gonna listen on that port, and we're gonna forward all requests into the isolated network to the random ports that the server is listening on. So we also add the entry point. So the entry point script is just starting up the application and also the domain boundary controller and configures runtime basically. So this image is the top layer image. This is what you execute. And as I mentioned, we have an underlying base image, and this base image is basically the installation of the domain boundary controller and Orbix. So this Docker file can be used as a template for all of the other CORBA applications that you will layer on top of it. It is using OpenSUSE, but you can choose any base OS that Docker is offering. So let me now start this containers that we just built it. So what I'm starting here is just a Docker run, and I'm giving it an address that is the IP address that they're going to be available on the outside. I'm going to start now this image. So it brings up the application, and it brings up the domain boundary controller. And what it does is basically, as the server comes up, it's exposed in its IOR. It has a local host and a random port. And in order to, and this IOR is not, with this IOR you cannot connect to it from the outside. So what we need to proxify the IOR and change the host name that is available from the outside, and the port, this is, in that case, it's a port 3000. So we have now the proxified IOR. It's the proxified IOR. So we can use this to connect with the client from the outside to the server. So I put the IOR into the server IOR file that the client is going to read. And now I can start the client, and I can create an account. And then we can see it's connected to the server on the IP specified on a port 3000. And now I can do operations on it. So I can deposit some money, and I can do withdraw. So as we can see, the operation goes seamlessly straight to the server, and everything is transparent as the server would be running on my machine without running into a Docker container. So now that demonstrates how easy it is to deploy a container and run it. So actually we could now run multiple containers, and that brings me to the second part of the demo, where I can now run the same container multiple times and use the console DNS service to connect to load balance between those containers. So I have the containers starting already, and four different containers. I start this one up, and now we're gonna stop this one where I connected directly to it. What we're gonna do now is just we run the same run command. All we're just changing is the bank service host name. That's going to be the host name that's going to be published in the IOR. So all it's needed is that, and it will use the DNS to resolve the name, and it will do load balancing with it. So let me start up this container now as well. So what we can see, all the four different instances, they listen on individual ports, on different ports, and this is all to the outside. It's all transparent, makes no difference on which ports they're listening, or to the outside, it's always the port 3000. So I have now the container running. I can now, this is now the server IOR with the new DNS host name. I would need to put this IOR into the server IOR file. So I can connect with the client to it. And what we can do now is I will show also how the DNS resolution looks like. So this is the DNS lookup on the bank service console, so the hostname I specified, and it comes back with 4 IP addresses that correspond to each of the individual servers that we have here. And if I do it a couple of times, you can see that it uses a randomized load balancing strategy. So if I do it a couple of times, it changes the order of the IP address, and the client will connect to the first IP it gets. So now let me bring up the client. We'll create an account, and this time connected. So you can see it resolved this, always the same host name, so the bank service console, and it resolved it to a 102 address. And let me bring another client up. Hit the same one. No. This time it went to the 100 address. If I do it quick enough, I should be able to hit all the different. I should be able to hit all the different clients. Yeah, this time it was 101. And yeah, so we, as demonstrated, it is a randomized load balancing. So with that, you can easily, with deploying a container multiple times and containerizing your CORBA application, you can easily avail of benefits that like load balancing and even high availability. So by using the Cloud for Docker product that we're going to bring up, so this product will simplify your setup and deployment of your CORBA application with full benefits of containerization. And that concludes the demo. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Albert. I think this gave us a pretty good idea of how easy it is to deploy and run existing CORBA applications in Docker containers. With the right Docker files, tooling, and the right runtime components that will be available in the CORBA for Cloud and Docker product. I'm now going to pass over to John Draga.
Thanks, Matteo. If I could have the slides again. There we go. Next slide, please. So I just want to thank everybody for showing up today, and I want to emphasize that the team here at Micro Focus is absolutely dedicated to help customers take advantage of the latest deployment technology. We've been working very hard to enable CORBA solutions and to help customers modernize and deploy their applications on a variety of platforms. We plan to have support for Amazon, AWS, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud, and Cloud Foundry. And we're also working, as you can see by some of the upcoming webinars, we're working on new ways to expose your CORBA services via REST, and we're also looking at some cordless some codeless solutions. These ad packs for Cloud and Docker are going to be available first on the Premier Orbs, VisiBroker, and Orbix, but we plan to roll those out to all the other Orbs that we support here at Micro Focus. And we're absolutely committed to support customers regardless of what Corba orb you've chosen and which one you're running. With that, I'll turn it back over to Ed. Thank you, everybody, for showing up.
Thank you, John. And to maybe just reiterate some of the points you mentioned, I mean, our philosophy is very simple, right? When it comes to modernization and transformation, it's helping our customers bridge the old and the new together. You know, everything we do is based on that simple principle that you have the tools, you have the applications, the systems in place to make you successful. The key is being able to bridge to that next generation technology, and that's exactly what you shared there, John. So thank you for sharing that with the group. For folks that may want to take some next steps with some of the technology that you've seen here today, perhaps you have some questions around how this would be applicable to your environment, we'd encourage you to reach out to your account manager. There's certainly a way to do that here through the email address that's available on the screen. You can certainly do that as well through our website at microfocus.com. If you're interested in starting a product trial of some of the latest Corba technologies, again, that's something that's available on microfocus.com/Corba. You can start that today. Or again, if you have some questions around the applicability of some of the technology and roadmap discussions we've had to your environment, we'd encourage you to reach out to your local Corba team, and we'll be happy to sit down and have those discussions with you. So again, thank you, John. Thank you, Adalbert. Thank you, Matteo, for your time today and some of the demonstrations and content you've shared with us. This brings us to the final part of our webinar and broadcast, which is the Q&A panel. So this is an opportunity for the folks that have joined us here today to pose their questions to our expert panel. Both myself and Kara Farley as moderators, I will do our best to provide those questions to the team to answer with the remaining time we have. I'm just going to take a few moments now to compile a few of the questions, as I know Kara is also, and I'll be back with you just a moment and we'll have a few questions. All right, we have a first question here. Looks like it might be for yourself, Matteo. In terms of the risks, what are the risks associated with migrating existing Corba deployments to containers?
The risks. Well, I would say, if anything, moving your Corba application to Docker should reduce your exposure to risk. Because you're taking your Corba application and you're packaging it into an isolated and standalone standardized unit. So you're making it portable. You're rebasing it on a standard platform that doesn't have lock-in to the particular OS that you're currently running it on, and also it reduces the expertise requirements on the people that are maintaining your Corba application, because once you've containerized it into a Docker image, there's really no expertise required to configure and deploy or operate your Corba application. It's just a standard Docker run command away. So I would say that reduces your exposure to risk. Obviously, you'll need to run through the steps required to Dockerize it, so there will be some some testing involved. I guess the other point that's fair to make is that if your Corba application is not currently running on a Linux platform, you'll have to port it to Linux first. But then again, it's a Corba application that we're talking about, so being based on top of your Corba product means that you're abstracted away from the underlying OS. So the porting effort will be minimal. And Corba guarantees that the underlying machine byteness or network is abstracted away, so it becomes easier to port. You don't need to concern yourself with those low-level communication details.
Thank you, Matteo. So I think there may be a follow-up question there. Based on sort of what you've shared, can this not be done with VMs instead of Docker containers? Is that possible too?
Yes, yeah. You can do that with VMs, and in fact, our CORBA for Cloud and Docker product will cater for both. So you can definitely use VMs, virtual machines, to deploy your CORBA applications, and will support whatever requirements customers have in terms of cloud and VMs or Docker. So I guess the answer is yes, you can. It's up to you, and it's down to your requirements to decide whether you want to use VM or cloud-based solution or a Docker solution, or indeed take Docker containers and deploy them in cloud environments. These are all supported scenarios that will support.
All right, thank you, Matteo. John, this looks like a question for you here. It relates to VisiBroker, looking for insights on the continued relevance of CORBA, and particularly as we see it related to virtualized and container-based deployments. So maybe based on some of the discussions you've had with clients, what you're seeing in the marketplace, continued relevance of CORBA.
Yeah, well, we've just recently been out to a number of customer sites. I mean, there are a large number of applications that are absolutely critical to business that are still running CORBA. It's alive and well, and part of our job is to help modernize that and help customers use the resources that they've got in order to do development and connect to existing CORBA services. VisiBroker is very much a part of that, as is Orbix, as is Orbicus and our open source products as well. So we don't really see much of a difference. We're out here to support CORBA in all of its forms.
Thank you, John. A question here related to training offerings, courses, and material. Is that type of material available for CORBA today?
We have in the past conducted some training courses. It's interesting this question comes up because I have recently been discussing with the training organization what our capacity might be to develop a CORBA course. As I've gone out and talked to multiple customers, that is a theme that's come up before. So I guess maybe at the end here we can do another ad hoc poll and see how many people would be interested in purchasing a course if we provided one. I know we did one of those on the previous webinar. So it's absolutely something that we're considering. If the demand's there, then we'll see if we can make that happen.
All right, thank you, John. Yes, good idea. So it looks like we got a question here related to the demo, Adalbert. Maybe a request for some clarification around what you showed there in terms of running the bank demo. The question here relates to multiple instances of the bank demo. Is the client effectively in multiple instances of the bank demo running in the same network? So maybe some clarification on where the application was running.
Yeah, so the client is running on my Windows host machine, and the bank servers are running in each individual containers. So it's not in the same network. The bank server is running an isolated Docker network. It cannot be connected directly via on the ports that it's exposed. And yeah, the client is basically running on my VM. It could be as well running completely outside on another machine, or so it doesn't have to be the same. It's definitely not the same network, and it can be running from anywhere. Once it's exposed completely, it can run anywhere basically, and that's the whole idea of it, that you can connect with the client from anywhere you want to, straight into your application.
Adalbert, I think you're using the Docker toolbox for Windows, right? You're running on Windows 7. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but your Docker containers are deployed inside VirtualBox VMs.
Exactly.
And those VMs are on a separate network. And then you run your client from your physical Windows box.
Exactly.
So yeah, so they're on different networks.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Adalbert. Thank you, Matteo. Is the demonstration you shared available if folks want to try it for themselves? How would they go about doing that? Any guidance there?
It's not currently available. The product is set to roll out at the beginning of next year, the end of this year. So I mean, we'll take a look at something that we might be able to put out in a shorter time frame for demo purposes. But this webinar, I think, is going to be recorded and available for review. And we certainly would entertain coming out and showing it to you in person if you guys are interested in that. There's still the work that we're going to do so that we can add this on to any one of our orbs, so all packaging aspect and all that. But we're far enough along, and we're actually engaged with some customers, and so it's real enough that we thought we'd show it to everybody.
All right. Thank you, John. That's great. I don't
guess
see any.
I'll say one other thing. All of these webinars are real enough that there is actual code behind them. So everything's in a form that it actually functions today. What we're doing now is adding additional pieces for deployment and packaging things up. So as you go on and you see us talk about CORBA and REST, those demos will be real as well.
Thank you, John. I don't see any other questions in the queue, but I'll give you another moment here to submit a question if you do have one. To John's point just a few moments ago, though, we can take a moment now to just do a brief sort of informal survey, if you will, particularly related to that documentation and training question. If that's something of interest to you, if that's something you're looking for, you have the ability to raise your hand under your name within the GoToWebinar chat function. If you just click that, raise your hand, we'll be able to just do a quick survey and get an idea of the interest of that topic to the group.
Great if we could see that. You're the only one that can see that, right?
Kara and I can see that, yes. So it looks like a few, John, that are interested in learning a little bit more about the training offerings. I see some late hands going up here. So I think something we'll probably want to incorporate into the next webinar there when we have some more detail, perhaps. All right, thank you folks for participating in that sort of short, informal survey. Just taking a quick look at the queue again. If there's another question? Kara, I don't see any other questions. Do you?
Nope, I don't think so.
Okay, very good. Well, John, any final words here for the folks before we wrap up?
No, I'd just like to thank everybody for coming out. The next webinar is about security, and looking forward to doing that one in June, I believe. And then we got a little bit of a break, and then we're going to come back and talk to everyone about REST. So I hope to see you all there.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Matteo. Thank you, Adalbert, for your time here today. And thank you, folks, as well, for joining us. As was mentioned, this webinar is being recorded, so you'll each receive a link to the recording that will be posted on microfocus.com. You'll have an opportunity to review that and forward that on to colleagues. If you do have any questions, certainly reach out to us or to your account manager directly. You have the email addresses of the folks that been on this webcast here today. But certainly, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about the roadmap and where Micro Focus corporate solutions are headed, we'd encourage you to reach out and connect with us. So thanks again for joining today's broadcast, and have a great day.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you.
Thank you.